The most dangerous person in modern history doesn't carry a weapon. He carries a camera, a smile, and 300 million subscribers. The best trick capitalism ever pulled was making exploitation look like generosity. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's economics. Karl Marx wrote something in Das Kapital, published in 1867, that describes the MrBeast phenomenon with terrifying precision. There's one specific passage where he explains how capitalism always generates its own defense mechanism, a mechanism that looks like the cure for the very disease it causes. I'll show you that exact passage. But first, you need to understand the machine from the outside, because what looks like charity might be the most sophisticated form of social control ever designed. By the end of this video, you will never look at a giveaway video the same way again. The spectacle machine. Let's start with the scale because it matters. MrBeast, real name Jimmy Donaldson, is the most subscribed individual creator in YouTube history. Over 300 million subscribers, over 40 billion total views. He has given away houses, cars, private islands, hundreds of millions of dollars in cash, surgeries to thousands of blind people, and food to entire villages across the developing world. By any rational measure, this is extraordinary. So why would Karl Marx have a problem with it? Here's the thing. Marx wouldn't have a problem with MrBeast the person. He would have a problem with what MrBeast represents. In 1867, in Das Kapital, Marx described something he called the fetishism of commodities, the way capitalism makes its systems appear natural, inevitable, and just, as if they simply exist, without anyone being exploited to sustain them. MrBeast's generosity is a commodity, a product, a performance, and like every commodity in Marx's framework, the moment you look behind it, behind the smiling face and the shocked recipient, what you find changes everything. This is not about whether MrBeast is a good person. It's about what his existence tells us about the system. And what comes next is going to make that disturbingly clear. Marx saw IT coming. Here's what most people get wrong about Karl Marx. He wasn't against wealthy individuals personally. He was against the system that makes some people extraordinarily wealthy while grinding everyone else into precarity. And in Das Kapital, he observed something that every person who has ever watched a charity video should sit with. Marx described how capitalism has a built-in survival instinct. When inequality becomes too visible, when the gap between the rich and the desperate becomes too obscene to ignore, the system doesn't reform itself. Instead, it produces a face. A friendly, generous, lovable face that says to the masses, "Don't worry, the rich give back." A face that absorbs the rage. A face that defends the architecture. This is not a modern observation. Accumulation of wealth at one pole is, therefore, at the same time accumulation of misery, agony of toil, slavery, ignorance, brutality, mental degradation at the opposite pole. He wrote that 157 years ago, before cameras, before YouTube, before any of this, and it has never been more precisely accurate than it is right now. If this is hitting differently than you expected, hit like and subscribe, because we are just getting started. Because what comes next is genuinely darker. The philanthropist trap. But wait, if you're thinking this sounds cynical or unfair to MrBeast specifically, consider the historical pattern. Andrew Carnegie gave away $350 million, roughly $65 billion in today's money. He funded libraries, universities, concert halls across America and Europe. His name is on buildings all over the world. He is celebrated as the patron saint of American philanthropy. And yet Carnegie built his fortune by paying steel workers $1.50 a day for 12-hour shifts in genuinely lethal conditions. When workers at his Homestead plant went on strike in 1892, demanding basic protections, Carnegie sent in private security that opened fire on the crowd. Dozens were wounded. People died. And then he donated a library. This is not ancient history. It is the pattern. Rockefeller, Gates, Bezos, Zuckerberg, each of them has a foundation. Each has a story about giving back. None of them have given back more than what they extracted. Marx called this ideological legitimation. The act of charity doesn't just help people. It legitimizes the process that created the inequality that required the charity in the first place. It transforms the cause of the problem into its apparent solution. That is a structural observation, not a moral judgment. And what you're about to hear about attention makes this even more unsettling. Attention is capital. Now forget everything you know about traditional capitalism for a moment. Marx built his theory around factories, physical labor, material goods. What happens when the product is not a car or a pair of shoes, but your attention? When the workers aren't making steel, they're making content, and the consumers aren't buying products. They're donating their time, their data, and their emotional responses. You are not watching MrBeast. MrBeast is watching you. Every second you spend on his channel, you generate behavioral data. That data is harvested, packaged, and sold to advertisers who use it to manipulate your purchasing decisions. Your attention, your most finite and irreplaceable resource, is being extracted without explicit consent. Media theorist Dallas Smythe called this the audience commodity, and it is exactly what Marx predicted would happen when capitalism exhausted physical goods to commodify. It would commodify people themselves, their time, their eyeballs, their emotional states. MrBeast doesn't just give away money, he collects attention at industrial scale. Your genuine emotional response to seeing someone receive a house they could never afford. That joy, that warmth, that hope is literally his product. Your empathy is being monetized, and you feel grateful for it. That is the elegance of the model. And the math behind it reveals exactly why this was inevitable. Charity is content. Here's a number that reframes everything. Industry estimates suggest MrBeast spends between $3 and $5 million to produce one major giveaway video. That includes production, crew, logistics, prizes, and operational overhead. Now here's the critical detail. A video at that scale generates significantly more than $3 to $5 million in ad revenue, brand partnerships, sponsorships, and merchandise conversions. The mathematics are precise and unambiguous. The charity is not charity in the traditional sense. It's content. I am not saying this to condemn the man. I'm saying it because it reveals something profound about how the system works. Capitalism has a remarkable capacity to absorb and commodify everything, including the human impulse toward compassion, including the desire to help, including genuine acts of goodness. When giving away a house generates a positive return on investment, you have successfully commodified kindness itself. Marx wrote extensively about this distinction between use value and exchange value. Something can have genuine use value. It improves real lives, while simultaneously functioning as exchange value, a commodity generating profit for its producer. MrBeast's giveaways are both real and instrumental simultaneously, and that paradox is not a contradiction. In Marxist economics, it is a feature. Understanding it is the key to understanding what comes next. The fetish of giving, commodity fetishism. When you see a pair of Nike shoes, you see a product, a brand, a clean design. What you don't see is the factory in Vietnam where a worker earned $3 a day to make them. The human labor, the actual human cost, has been systematically erased from the object you hold. You see the commodity, not the suffering embedded within it. Now apply this to YouTube. When you watch MrBeast give someone $1 million, you see generosity, joy, hope. What you don't see is the 40 billion views that generated the capital to fund that moment. The content moderators working traumatizing jobs at poverty wages. The warehouse workers fulfilling sponsored products. The advertising corporations, whose products fund the giveaway, extracting surplus value from their own workers elsewhere. The entire extractive ecosystem that had to grind through millions of ordinary people before a single dollar could be handed to someone on camera. The worker becomes all the poorer the more wealth he produces, the more his production increases in power and size. That was written about factory workers in 1867. But it describes every viewer who generates ad revenue for YouTube without receiving a single cent of it. And the system that made it all necessary remains completely untouched. What comes next exposes exactly how the platform keeps this loop permanently running. Algorithm vampires. YouTube takes a 45% cut of all advertising revenue from every single video on its platform. So when MrBeast generates tens of millions of dollars in ad revenue, YouTube quietly takes nearly half of it. For doing what, exactly? For owning the platform, for owning the infrastructure, for owning the distribution system that creators depend on for their entire livelihood. No labor required whatsoever. This is precisely what Marx described as the extraction of surplus value by the class that owns the means of production. Except the means of production is no longer a factory floor. It's an algorithm, a server farm, a recommendation system. YouTube doesn't create content. It extracts value from content, and it gives creators just enough of that extracted value to keep them producing indefinitely, to keep them dependent, to keep them in a relationship that presents itself as creative freedom, but functions identically to wage labor. MrBeast, for all his wealth and global influence, is still fundamentally working for YouTube. He must produce content constantly. The moment he stops, the algorithm deprioritizes him. His audience migrates. A new creator fills the void. In Marxist terms, he is an extremely well-compensated factory worker in a factory he does not own and cannot control. The platform captures the value that an entire community creates. Let me pause here, because what comes next explains why almost nobody sees any of this. False consciousness. Marx had a concept he called false consciousness. The idea that oppressed people frequently adopt the worldview of those who oppress them, not because they're foolish, but because the ruling class controls the stories, the cultural institutions, and the language through which people understand their own conditions. You don't just own the factory, you own the narrative about the factory. In 2024, nobody controls the narrative more powerfully than someone with 300 million subscribers and an unlimited production budget. We don't see the cage. Here is the false consciousness of the MrBeast era. We look at a system generating obscene inequality, and we respond with genuine relief. At least some of the rich give back. We celebrate the charity as the solution, while the charity actively prevents us from examining the cause. Why demand universal health care when MrBeast funds individual surgeries? Why organize for living wages when he gives away houses? Why push for structural economic reform when someone is already distributing cash on YouTube? This is not cynicism. This is what Marx called ideological function, the way that genuine acts of goodness can serve the interests of a system that produces the very need for those acts. Give someone a house. Leave the system that made them unhoused completely intact. We are arriving now at the exact moment I promised you at the very beginning of this video. The Marx passage. I promised you a specific passage. Here it is. In Das Kapital, Volume 1, Chapter 25, Karl Marx described what he called the general law of capitalist accumulation. He argued that as capital concentrates at one end of society, it necessarily produces an expanding class of precarious workers at the other. But then he went further. He observed that capitalism will always find a mechanism to make this arrangement appear not just tolerable, but virtuous. A mechanism where the very people who accumulated through extraction become the heroes of a story about generosity. The spectacle, the philanthropist who gives away millions, while the system that generated those millions impoverishes billions, is not an exception to capitalism. He is its proof of concept, its marketing department, its most effective defense. Marx was precise about this logic. He didn't claim that capitalists are evil. He claimed that the system produces both the wound and the bandage, and that the bandage is always far more visible than the wound. MrBeast is the bandage. Accumulation of capital is increase of the proletariat. One person's ability to give away $1 million on camera is directly proportional to the number of people who cannot afford what he's giving away. The giveaway is not the solution to that equation. It is the equation. That is what Marx predicted 170 years ago. That is what should terrify you. Now I want to hear from you directly. Do you think what MrBeast does is genuine philanthropy making real change, or is it a symptom of a broken system? Comment philanthropy or symptom. There is no wrong answer, but I want to know where you actually stand. The system always wins. Here is the most unsettling conclusion of everything we have examined. The system doesn't need MrBeast to be malicious. It doesn't need him to be aware of any of this. It just needs him to exist. The more he gives, the more powerful the system that required the giving becomes. Every giveaway generates views. Every view generates revenue. That revenue funds more giveaways, more views, more revenue. The cycle is perfectly self-perpetuating and self-legitimizing. Every act of individual generosity releases precisely enough social pressure to prevent the demand for collective structural transformation. It is, as Marx would describe it, a pressure valve. A beautiful, entertaining, emotionally satisfying pressure valve. Individual charity keeps breathing the system that structural change would stop. This doesn't mean you should stop watching MrBeast. It doesn't mean his kindness isn't genuine. It means you should ask, every single time you encounter a giveaway video, who ultimately benefits? Follow the money past the recipient, past the creator, past the platform, all the way back to the architecture of the system that made the giveaway both possible and necessary. That is the question Marx spent his entire life trying to make people ask. The system that creates billionaires is the same system that needs them to give back. And until that loop breaks, 170 years later, Marx keeps being right. Here's what I want you to carry with you. Not cynicism, not despair. Clarity is the most radical act available to an ordinary person. Marx didn't write Das Kapital to make you miserable. He wrote it to make you SCE, to see past the performance of generosity to the system that performs it. To understand that the same force that creates a billionaire who gives away houses is the force that created the conditions making those houses unaffordable in the first place. MrBeast is not the villain in this story. He is a mirror, and what the mirror reflects is a system so extraordinarily good at producing its own justification that it turned human compassion into content. It turned charity into marketing, and it made hundreds of millions of people feel grateful for the arrangement. The next time you watch a giveaway video, feel the joy, really feel it. It's real. And then ask the question Karl Marx spent his entire life trying to make people ask: who built this world, and at whose expense? If you made it this far, and this shifted something in how you see the world, even slightly, comment Kapital spectacle to prove you're one of the few who actually looks behind the curtain. The truth is stranger than anything you could make up. If your brain is running overtime right now, hit subscribe, because next time it gets even deeper.